Eleanor sat at the worn oak table in her small kitchen. The kind of table that had seen decades of spilled coffee, birthday cakes, and whispered secrets. Her hands, lined with age and stories, trembled as she held the phone. The screen glowed with a post from her daughter, Claire. On a public forum for all their small town to see, "Mom's a burden. I can't keep carrying her weight. She's draining us dry." Each word was a shard of glass, slicing through the fragile trust Eleanor had clung to for years. At 72, she'd never imagined her only child would broadcast such venom to the world. The ache in her chest wasn't just betrayal, it was the weight of a lifetime's love unraveling. Eleanor had raised Claire alone after her husband, Tom, died in a car accident when Claire was just 6. Those were hard years, scraping by on a librarian's salary in their sleepy Ohio town. Eleanor had sewn Claire's dresses from thrift store fabric, stayed up late helping with math homework, and cheered at every school play, even when Claire forgot her lines. She'd poured every ounce of herself into her daughter, believing that love was a shield, unbreakable. But now, staring at Claire's words, Eleanor felt that shield shatter. The house was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old floorboards. Eleanor's home, a modest 2-bedroom with peeling paint and a sagging porch, was her sanctuary. She'd lived here for 40 years, each corner filled with memories of Claire's laughter, her first steps, her teenage tantrums. Now, it felt like a museum of a life that no longer existed. Claire, now 38, lived just 10 miles away with her husband, Greg, and their 2 kids. Eleanor had moved in with them briefly last year after a fall fractured her hip, but she'd fought to return to her own home, hating the idea of being a burden. She'd thought Claire understood. The post had been up for 3 days, racking up comments from neighbors, strangers, even Claire's high school friends. "That's tough, Claire, but you gotta do what's best for your family. Have you considered a nursing home? She's lucky you've done this much." Eleanor's cheeks burned as she read, her heart pounding with a mix of shame and fury. She wasn't a burden. She'd paid her own bills, kept her house tidy, even baked cookies for Claire's kids when they visited. But Claire's words painted her as a leech, a weight dragging her daughter down. Eleanor set the phone down and stared at the kitchen wall, where a faded photo of Claire's graduation hung. She remembered that day, Claire's proud smile, the way she'd hugged Eleanor and whispered, "We made it, Mom." Where had that girl gone? When had love turned to resentment? Eleanor's eyes drifted to a stack of mail on the counter, unopened envelopes from the bank, the utility company, and one from the county clerk's office. She'd been helping Claire with her mortgage payments, dipping into her meager savings when Claire and Greg fell behind. It was a secret she'd kept, not wanting to embarrass her daughter. But the latest letter from the bank, tucked under the pile, told a different story. Claire's house was in foreclosure. They'd missed payments for months, despite Eleanor's help. Her fingers tightened around the letter. She'd sacrificed so much: her retirement fund, her comfort, her Perdetto keep Claire afloat. And this was her reward. A public shaming. A digital scarlet letter branding her as a burden. Eleanor's breath hitched, and for a moment, she felt the weight of her age, the fragility of her bones. But beneath that, something else stirred, a spark of defiance. She wasn't done yet. She wasn't the weak, useless woman Claire had described. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She sat at her old desktop computer, the one Claire had mocked as ancient, and logged into the same forum. Her hands shook as she typed, but her resolve was iron. She uploaded a scanned copy of the foreclosure notice, the stark black and white document that laid bare Claire's financial ruin. Her caption was simple: My daughter called me a burden online. Here's the truth. Her house is in foreclosure. Despite my help. Maybe it's time we all stop pretending. She hit post and felt a rush. Like stepping off a cliff. It wasn't just revenge, it was a reclamation of her dignity. For years, she'd let Claire's needs eclipse her own. But no more. The post went live at 2:13 a.m. And by morning, the town would be buzzing. Eleanor leaned back in her chair. The screen's glow illuminating her face. She didn't know what would come next. But for the first time in years, she felt like she was fighting back. The next morning, Eleanor woke to the sound of her phone buzzing relentlessly. Notifications piled up, comments, messages, even calls from numbers she didn't recognize. She ignored them all, choosing instead to make her usual cup of tea. The ritual grounded her, the warmth of the mug steadying her nerves. Outside, the world was waking up, oblivious to the storm she'd unleashed. She wondered how Claire would react when she saw the post. Would she call, screaming, show up at the door, begging for forgiveness? Or would she double down, painting Eleanor as the villain? By noon, Claire's car screeched into the driveway. Eleanor watched from the window as her daughter stormed up the porch steps, her face red with fury. The door flew open, and Claire stood there, eyes blazing. How could you? Mom, you posted our foreclosure notice. Do you know how humiliating this is? Eleanor met her gaze, unflinching. Humiliating. You wrote that I'm a burden for the whole town to see. You think that didn't hurt? Claire's mouth opened, then closed. For a moment, Eleanor saw a flicker of the little girl who'd once clung to her, scared of thunderstorms. But it was gone as quickly as it came. You don't get it. Claire snapped. You don't know what it's like. Taking care of everyone. Paying for everything. While you just sit here. I paid for your house, Eleanor said quietly. I gave you everything I had. Claire's face crumpled, but she didn't back down. And it wasn't enough. We're drowning. Mom. Greg's job isn't enough. The kids need things. And Yuri just another expense. The words landed like a slap. Eleanor wanted to scream, to shake Claire until she saw the truth. But instead, she turned away, her voice steady. Get out. Come back when you remember what family means. Claire left without another word, the door slamming behind her. Eleanor stood alone in the silence, her heart heavy but resolute. She'd exposed the truth, not just to hurt Claire, but to force them both to face it. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was salvation. Either way, the pieces of their broken bond were scattered now, and picking them up would take more than words. The days following the confrontation were a blur of silence and whispers. Eleanor's post had spread like wildfire through the town's online forums, shared and dissected by neighbors who thrived on gossip. Some called her brave. Others called her cruel. An eye for an eye, one commenter wrote. She's just an old lady lashing out, said another. Eleanor didn't read the comments anymore. She'd said her piece, and now she waited. Though for what? She wasn't sure. Her routine became her anchor. She woke at dawn, tended her small garden, and baked bread, the scent filling the house with a warmth that felt like defiance. She avoided her phone, letting the battery die. But the weight of Claire's words lingered, a bruise that wouldn't fade. Eleanor had always believed family was a pact, a promise to carry each other through the dark. Had she failed Claire somehow, planting the seeds of resentment? Or had Claire chosen to see her as a burden, ignoring the sacrifices that had shaped their lives? One afternoon, while pruning her roses, Eleanor heard a car pull up. It wasn't Claire's sleek sedan, but a battered pickup she recognized as belonging to Mrs. Hargrove, the town's librarian and Eleanor's friend for decades. Margaret Hargrove, with her sharp wit and sharper tongue, stepped out, holding a casserole dish. "Figured you could use some company," she said, her eyes kind but searching. They sat at the kitchen table, the casserole untouched. Margaret didn't mince words. "You stirred up a hornet's nest, Ellie. Half the town's talking about you and Claire. The other half's pretending they're not." Eleanor sighed, her fingers tracing the edge of her teacup. "I didn't mean to start a war. I couldn't let her lie stand." Margaret nodded. "I get it. But you know Claire's struggling. Greg's been out of work more than he's been in it. And those kids are growing fast." Doesn't excuse what she said, but it's context. Eleanor's chest tightened. She'd known about Greg's layoffs, the way Claire's pride kept her from asking for help outright. But context didn't erase the sting of being called a burden. "I gave her everything, Mark. My savings, my time. And she threw it back in my face." Margaret reached across the table, her hand warm on Eleanor's. "You're not a burden. Never were. But Claire's got her own battles. Maybe she's lashing out because she's scared." Eleanor wanted to argue, to cling to her anger. But Margaret's words cracked open a door she'd kept shut. Fear. Was that what drove Claire to post those words? Fear of losing her home, her family, her control. Eleanor had felt that fear too, raising Claire alone, wondering if she'd lose the house to bills or the bank. But she'd never turned on her daughter. That evening, alone again, Eleanor pulled out a box of old letters from the attic. They were from Claire's childhood notes she'd written to Eleanor, full of crayon hearts and promises to love Mommy forever. Reading them, Eleanor's eyes blurred with tears. She saw Claire's messy handwriting, her earnest words, and wondered where that love had gone. She didn't want to lose her daughter, but she couldn't keep giving pieces of herself to someone who saw her as a weight. The next day, Eleanor drove to the community center, where she volunteered twice a week. The kids there, Yellowstone called her Grandma Ellie, a nickname she secretly loved. Today, they were painting autumn leaves, their small hands smudged with color. A girl named Lily, barely 10, tugged at Eleanor's sleeve. "You okay, Grandma Ellie? You look sad." Eleanor smiled, her heart aching. "Just thinking, sweetheart." She didn't mention the post or Claire. Instead, she helped Lily blend red and orange paint, marveling at the girl's focus. These kids, with their boundless energy and unfiltered questions, reminded her of Claire at that age, curious, fearless, full of light. On the drive home, Eleanor passed Claire's house. The foreclosure notice taped to the door was gone, but the windows were dark, the yard unkempt. She didn't stop. She wasn't ready to face Claire. Not yet. But as she drove, she thought about Margaret's words. Fear. Maybe Claire was scared. Maybe Eleanor was too. The thought lingered, a seed of doubt in her righteous anger. That night, Eleanor sat at her computer again. She didn't post anything new. Instead, she wrote an email to Claire, her fingers hesitating over the keys. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was angry, and I lashed out. But we need to talk. Really talk. I'm still your mother, and I love you." She didn't send it. Not yet. The words felt too raw, too vulnerable. But writing them eased something in her chest, like loosening a knot. The town's whispers grew louder over the next few days. Eleanor overheard snippets at the grocery store, repeating glances, hushed voices. She held her head high, refusing to let their judgment define her. But at home, alone, the weight of it all pressed down. She missed Claire's voice, her laugh, even her stubborn streak. She missed her grandkids, who hadn't visited since the fight. The silence of her house felt louder than ever. A week later, a letter arrived from Claire. No return address, just Eleanor's name in Claire's sharp handwriting. Eleanor's hands shook as she opened it, expecting another accusation. Instead, it was short, almost curt. Can we meet? Somewhere neutral. The diner. Saturday. Noon. No apology. No explanation. Just a request. Eleanor's heart thudded. She wanted to say no, to protect herself from more pain. But she couldn't. She'd never been able to say no to Claire. Saturday came, cold and gray. Eleanor arrived at the diner early, choosing a booth by the window. The place smelled of coffee and fried onions, a familiar comfort. She wore her best sweater, a soft green one Claire had given her years ago. When Claire walked in, Eleanor's breath caught. Her daughter looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled back haphazardly. She slid into the booth, avoiding Eleanor's gaze. "I didn't think you'd come," Claire said, her voice low. "I almost didn't," Eleanor admitted. "But I'm here." Claire nodded, staring at her coffee. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Claire spoke. "I'm sorry. For the post. I was angry. I didn't mean it." Eleanor's throat tightened. "You meant it enough to write it." Claire flinched. "I was overwhelmed. Greg's been out of work. The kids need braces. The house." I snapped. "I shouldn't have said it." Eleanor wanted to believe her, but the hurt ran deep. "And I shouldn't have posted that notice. But I was angry too. I felt betrayed." Claire's eyes met hers, glistening. "I know. I saw it. And, God, Mom, it was humiliating. Everyone knows now." Eleanor reached for her hand, then stopped. "I didn't do it to hurt you. I did it to make you see me. I'm not a burden. Claire, I'm your mother." Claire's face crumpled. "I know. I don't know how to fix this." The waitress brought their food, pancakes for Eleanor, a burger for Claire. They ate in silence, the clink of forks loud in the space between them. Eleanor thought of the letters in the attic, the crayon hearts. She wanted to bridge the gap, but the words felt stuck. Finally, Claire spoke. "Greg's got a new job. It's not much, but it's something. We're trying to save the house. I should have told you." Eleanor nodded. "I wish you had. I could have helped more." "You've helped enough," Claire said, her voice breaking. "Too much. I didn't see it." For the first time, Eleanor saw the fear Margaret had mentioned. Claire's hands shook as she sipped her coffee, her bravado gone. Eleanor wanted to hug her, to erase the pain. But it wasn't that simple. "We've both made mistakes," she said. "But we're family. We fix things." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "Can we? After this?" Eleanor reached across the table, her hand covering Claire's. "We try. That's what families do." They didn't solve everything that day, but they talked. Really talked. For the first time in months. Claire admitted her shame, her fear of failing her kids. Eleanor shared her loneliness, her hurt. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. When they left the diner, Claire hugged her. A quick, fierce embrace that felt like a promise. Back home, Eleanor sent the email she'd written venturing into the kitchen. Eleanor found a small, yellowed photograph tucked into the drawer of her bedside table. It was a picture of Claire as a toddler, sitting on Eleanor's lap, her tiny hands clutching a stuffed rabbit. Eleanor's heart ached at the memory. She'd kept the photo all these years, a reminder of simpler times. She sat at the table, staring at it, the ache in her chest growing. Maybe Claire was right. Maybe they could try again. The next day, Eleanor volunteered at the community center again. The kids were making paper pumpkins, their chatter filling the room with life. Lily ran up, holding a lopsided pumpkin. "Look, Grandma Ellie." Eleanor smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. "It's perfect, Lily." The girl beamed and ran back to her friends. Eleanor watched, thinking of Claire's childhood crafts, the way she'd proudly show off her work. The memory was a knife, but it also carried hope. They were trying. That was enough for now. Over the next week, Eleanor and Claire texted cautiously, testing the waters. Claire invited her to dinner with the kids, a small gesture that felt huge. Eleanor arrived at Claire's house with a batch of cookies, her grandkids' favorite. The house looked better, fresh paint on the porch, the lawn mowed. Claire had been working hard to hold it together. The kids, Mia and Ethan, rushed to hug her. "Grandma Ellie," they shouted, their voices a balm to her soul. Dinner was awkward at first, but the kids' chatter broke the ice. Claire talked about Greg's new job, her voice hesitant but hopeful. Eleanor listened, offering quiet support. After dinner, they played a board game, laughing over silly moves. It wasn't perfect, but it was family. Eleanor drove home under a starlit sky, her heart full. She thought of the foreclosure notice, the post, the pain. But she also thought of Claire's apology, her hug. The road ahead was long, but they were on it together. At home, she pulled out the box of letters again, reading one from Claire at age 10, "You're the best mom ever." Eleanor smiled through tears. They'd find their way back. The weeks that followed were a slow dance of healing. Eleanor and Claire met for coffee, went for walks, and talked about the past. Claire opened up about her fears, her shame, and Eleanor shared her own. They cried, laughed, and began to rebuild. One day, Claire brought the kids to Eleanor's house. They baked cookies together, the kitchen filled with giggles and flour. Eleanor saw Claire's old spark in her eyes, a sign of hope. At the community center, Eleanor taught the kids to make paper snowflakes, her hands steady despite the memories. Lily asked, "Grandma Ellie, are you and Mommy okay now?" Eleanor hugged her. "We're working on it, sweetheart." The words felt true, a promise of progress. Months later, Eleanor and Claire were stronger. They celebrated Mia's birthday together, the house full of balloons and laughter. Claire gave Eleanor a new sweater, bright blue, to match her eyes. She said. Eleanor wore it proudly, feeling the warmth of family. The foreclosure notice was gone, the post forgotten. They'd faced the truth and chosen love. Eleanor sat in her garden that evening, the roses blooming under the setting sun. She thought of Claire's childhood, the crayon hearts, the promises. They'd hurt each other, but they'd also healed. Family wasn't perfect, but it was worth fighting for. She looked at the stars, grateful for second chances,